You're listening to I Have Some Notes, a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported.
Welcome, everyone, to I Have Some Notes, the movie podcast with cuts, keeps, punch-ups, and tweaks for great movies as suggested by us. I'm your host, Liam Creswick.
I'm Scott C. Bourgeois.
I'm Greg Beaver.
And on today's Side Notes edition, we are discussing the top films of the last year and also the previous year, because time is a flat circle and makes no sense. Our movie watching was interrupted, movie production was interrupted, so our recap for the year is actually for the last 2 years, 2020 and 2021.
Yeah, 2019's been going on for a lot of months now.
Yeah.
Unlike Scott, I have not managed to watch a ton of movies in the last 2 years. So hence why I pitched doing 2020 and 2021. But apparently Scott went on a movie bender just to blasting through films.
Yeah, though you say 2020 and 2021 movies, and I have not watched, apparently, very many of those. Not a lot that came out in the last couple of years that I was like, I want to see that now, as opposed to, I could wait for that to appear on streaming. So, haven't seen Dune yet, not exactly rushing out to movie theaters. But yes, I have watched very nearly 365 films in the last 365 days. And by New Year's Eve, my goal is to have watched 365 films this year. So
a Herculean feat, if there ever was one. Does those include all the bad movies that we watched?
Definitely, yes.
They all count.
Yeah. And I mean, some of them are rewatches. Those are being counted too, but not a lot of them. I've actually made a point to try to go out of my way and watch movies that I'd missed or hadn't gotten around to seeing yet. So I've watched a fair number of classic movies and foreign films that I'd just never gotten around to. And I've seen some really good movies this year, but unfortunately, none of them qualify for this list. So
yeah, I'm very much like a safe and comfort guy when it comes to the pandemic. I've been watching a lot of stuff I've seen before or whatever. So this episode was good because it was pushing me to have a goal about watching a bunch of things that I hadn't seen. So this last couple of weeks, I've played catch up on watching a bunch of stuff that I hadn't seen yet.
Yeah, I surprised myself when I crunched the numbers and looked at, I have actually seen most of the stuff I wanted to from 2020, and all the stuff from 2021 I haven't seen is stuff that's still in theaters, right? So Last Night in Soho, Dune, Pig. I was really surprised that I had watched as much as I did. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, right off the hop, we wanted to talk about a movie that we all watched, and I think I'm correct in saying we all liked. Yes.
Yes. And also, before we get into it, just for our listeners, a little note on the format. When we all kind of crunched the numbers and tried to figure out what our top movies were, I think a lot of us just ended up with movies we're excited to talk about on the podcast, versus maybe a top 3 or a top 5 list. Because I even would say, definitely in my top 5 or top of the thing was Feels Good Man. But we got a whole other Side Notes episode on that. So if you want to hear my thoughts on Feels Good Man, go listen to that.
Yeah, and likewise, I really, really liked Tenet, which would probably have been in my top 5 movies from the last 2 years, but we already did an episode on it. So
yeah, I actually purposely left documentaries off of my top 10, quote unquote, just because we had 2 of my favorite ones we had done an entire episode about. So it just seemed like I'd be repeating myself.
The one film, as Greg was trying to set up, and then I interrupted him, that we had all seen that appeared on at least one of our lists, was, of course, Scott, you want to do the honors? It's your pick?
Sure. It was Palm Springs from 2020. What a movie to come out in 2020. Because it is a movie about a guy who's stuck in a time loop and has descended into nihilism because of it, and kind of gets pushed out of that by other people entering his time loop. and there suddenly being consequences to his actions, I guess would be the best way to put it. And it was such a perfect microcosm of where we were all at the time that it came out. Like, they couldn't have planned for that movie to come out better than it did. And it kind of flew under the radar a bit, I feel. And it was surprisingly good, actually. Like, it's got a really rock-solid cast. It's led by Andy Samberg, Kristen Milioti, and J.K. Simmons. And they hit it out of the park. It's a really good movie. It explores some interesting ideas. It takes a different look at the idea of a time loop. In a way, it kind of deconstructs Groundhog Day and then reconstructs it in a fun way, which I quite like. And I really enjoyed Palm Springs. Gentlemen, you also have hinted that you quite liked it. What were your thoughts on Palm Springs?
I mean, everything you said, everything the critics have said, it's just a really well-constructed comedy, well-constructed science fiction story, well-constructed drama, right? Like a good arc, like the character goes through a really satisfying arc. But there was one little touch that I really appreciated, and I might have even, if we offhanded discussed this movie in a previous episode, I might have said this before, because I feel like I've said this to you guys. But it's a time loop. Screw it. I get to repeat myself. There's a scene when he talks about all the ways he's tried to break the loop, like staying up super late and getting like to another continent because he stayed awake for 16 hours or something like that. And the thing I liked about the second act of that film is it did the right amount of playing within the rules that it set up and answering some of those what if questions in a way that I found really satisfying as the kind of person who watches a movie with like sci-fi rules like that and be like, well, if that's true, wouldn't XYZ be true? And they do just enough to like satisfy me, but they also don't waste a whole lot of time on it.
Yep.
And so like seeing him, all the ways that he's tried to like break the loop, I thought was a really nice, satisfying way of playing in the world without squandering too much time.
I also like the concept of how Samberg's character is scared to leave the loop when the possibility comes up, and how he's like settled into the comfortable nihilism of his existence. And the idea of moving on is legitimately terrifying to him. And that was an interesting twist on it because, yeah, that makes sense. Like so many time loop stories are all about people desperately trying to get out of the loop. And he did go through that phase, but now he's at a point where he's like, I don't know if I could live in the real world anymore. And that's just, it's such an interesting headspace to find a character in that movie. And that becomes part of the conflict he has to overcome. I'm not trying to spoil the movie. It's just a great movie. If you haven't seen Palm Springs, seek it out. It's available. And watch it. It's really good.
Yeah, that's the part of it, him already being nihilistic and just resigned to his fate of being in the loop, that was fresh to me. Like there's been quite a few time loop films to come out or shows. Like I'm thinking of Edge of Tomorrow or Russian Doll with Natasha Lyonne. And most of them follow a similar track where they try to get out. At some point, they all become a little nihilistic, like they all kind of give up. There's that kind of, that's your lowest point in the arc, right? And then they come back. But that's sort of what I really enjoyed about it. It's just sort of like dumping you in. Is like, oh, this guy's he's already stuck in it. You're kind of dealing with it, and so really good, really funny, and I liked. I like the solution to it where she figures out how to get out of all right, spoilers for Palm Springs coming up right here. So skip ahead a couple of maybe 30 seconds or so, but like she figures out how to get out of the loop by learning quantum mechanics
because she's got all the time in the
internet.
World, right?
Yeah. It's I just kind of enjoyed that, and I kind of like that the solution was just like her wearing a bunch of C4 just blowing up the time portal, so to speak. That was great. I do like the framing device too of, you follow a character as they first get into the time loop, but there's already characters in the time loop when she gets there. So we kind of get to move through some of that initial figuring out you're in a time loop stuff because she has the secondhand experience from the other characters.
Yeah, the line,
smartly done.
Oh, it's one of those time loops you might have heard of. And she's like, time loops I might have heard of. Yeah.
Yeah, it follows a similar track to Edge of Tomorrow in that way.
Well, and it also, at its core, it's about three people discovering that life without consequences is also kind of meaningless, and moving beyond that in an interesting way. And yeah, again, it was the perfect movie to come out when it did, because we were like, it was the height of the pandemic scare, when we were all afraid to go outside and like washing our groceries when we got home. Like things were much more intense than they are now. And yeah, it was just the right movie at the right time, and it was really good. And we talked a lot about it, so I think it's time for somebody else to mention one of their movies.
Yeah, Greg, hit us. What was one of your favorites in the last 2 years?
It didn't necessarily hit my top three, but I just recently watched The Harder They Fall, which is a Western by James Samuel that's on Netflix. This movie was rad. Like, it's just oozing with style, not only cinematically, but just like the wardrobe is fantastic in this film. And just someone had mentioned to me on Twitter that like everyone is so good looking in this movie, and it's absolutely true. Just that every single actor is dressed to the nines, and they look fantastic in every scene. And it's just a joy visually from start to finish. It has a very pretty simple plot, but it sort of makes up for it in style. Although there is a nice twist at the end, which makes getting to the end a lot of fun. So, for me, I think I was thinking about this is an all black cast, and by and large, there are very few white people in the movie at all. The only white people that really appear are ones that get robbed by the main characters, which is hilarious. And I was thinking about Black Panther when I was watching it, just because I hadn't seen a Western from an entirely black perspective before, and that was just so interesting to see that vision, to see how the West is interpreted. Slavery is sort of like, it's not really mentioned. It's like no, we're not doing that. We're these are characters with agency and things like that. Like, there's a couple passing references to it, but like by and large, it's just like, this is just a full on Western with an excellent black cast. And it just kind of tickled me the same way that like Black Panther did, is just like seeing this completely different vision that we just don't seem to get enough of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I unfortunately haven't seen this movie. It's on my list to watch. Actually, my girlfriend, her and I have a little list of like movies we want to watch together, and she put it on there, and I was like, "Ooh, what's this?" And then I was like, "Damn, how did this get past me?" But there's a podcast actually that's available called Black Cowboys, and I didn't realize how many black and Hispanic people were what we consider cowboys in the Wild West. And it's part of that like great whitewashing of the North American story that like all cowboys are white guys. And it's like, no, they're good. Like a huge number of them were black or Hispanic. And so I'm glad, I'm glad they made a movie like this to sort of correct that. And also, if anyone wants to learn more, there's a podcast called Black Cowboys from this year.
That's really cool. Yeah, the only other thing I'll mention about this film before we move on is that I really loved the efficiency of characters. Like, it's got a pretty large cast, but every character's got a good quirk and a small little arc to them, and every single one gets a moment, like a fantastic moment. So, hats off to the screenwriter who's also James Samuel. It's just, well put together.
Gonna have to check that one out. Yeah,
it is It is already on two of my lists, my own lists of movies to watch this year and the one my girlfriend made.
Speaking of movies you watched this year, Liam.
Yeah, we'll do one of mine, and I'll keep it in that same sort of vein of movies about the black experience and how that's an enlightening thing for a white dude to be watching in 2021, and also just having a good time with the movies. As I was putting my list together of the movies I'd seen, the movies I wanted to talk to, I kind of actually ran into a lot of redundancies, like a lot of the same movie or same like movies that sort of check the same box, and I was having a hard time making cuts. So I'm going to sort of compare and contrast as I go, to basically just my way of cheating and doing more movies than the allotted 3 we gave ourselves. But I watched, 2 films, that sort of looked at the grotesque treatment of black people by the United States government. One was slightly better than the other, but they were both great. Trial of the Chicago 7. Was really entertaining and endearing, and I had no idea that that series of events took place. So if you get a chance to check out Trial of Chicago 7, but more so, and the movie I want to talk about is called Judas and the Black Messiah. So this film follows, it's a biopic of a fellow named Fred Hampton, who is the chairman of the Black Panther chapter in Chicago in the 70s. And the FBI found a guy, like a sort of a 2-bit criminal named Bill O'Neill, who was going around using a fake FBI ID to like do crime stuff. And they rope him in to be an informant who infiltrates the Black Panther Party. And it's just a really brilliant biopic of these two men. In the case of Bill O'Neill, played by Lakeith Stanfield, you see just this like tragic story of a race traitor, like just not just like a race traitor, but just like a traitor to the common good. Like he really, he completely undermines for 12 years the hard work that Fred Hampton is doing, and in this film, you also get to see the hard work Fred Hampton is doing, and in that way it was very enlightening and inspiring, because Fred Hampton, even though he's in the Black Panther, he's a community organizer. He's like getting people together, he's solving problems, he's like making school lunches for kids, he's talking about socialism, and it was like this absolute gut punch where you get this story of an incredibly inspiring individual organizing his community and doing right in the world. And then all the while, the point of view of the movie is this guy who is fucking him over. And like lying and pretending to be his friend. And it is heartbreaking. And the ending is absolutely heartbreaking. It's based on a true story, but spoilers for history, I guess. Once it kind of all came out that Bill O'Neill had been doing this, he kills himself in the late 80s. And there's a really powerful shot of Lakeith Stanfield as Bill O'Neill, and then they show you the same footage of a PBS interview that the real Bill O'Neill did, and you just the look on both of those guys' face, the actor and the real guy, you can see behind his eyes that he's like, he knows he has done like a injustice on a cosmic level, and then you find out they do the thing that biopics do, where it's like, later so and so went on to do this, so and so went on to do that, like in a text scroll, and it's like Bill O'Neill fucking killed himself because he's a traitor, and it's just like it inspired me to want to be a better community leader, and it broke my heart that there are so many insidious, awful people in the world undermining the good hard work that needs to be done. So
yeah, it's I mean, that's part of the reason why it feels like nothing ever changes, right? Because there are so many bad actors just walking around, either outright, being unscrupulous people, or doing it underneath the covers, I guess, so
yeah. It really does create this like weird back and forth when I've been thinking about it in the when I've been thinking about it in the months since I've watched it, where it's like, you get sad. When I get sad thinking about all the bad actors in the world, I think about Bill O'Neill. But then when I get inspired thinking about all the incredible leader, the Greta Thunbergs, I needed a second pull or I'm going to have people rolling their eyes, but just like community leaders, right? Like people who are doing good in the world. You also have this biography of Fred Hampton, who was a very cool guy, doing incredible work. And also it's played by, I'm going to screw up his name, but, Daniel, Kaluuya.
Yep.
Who's just, both him and Lakeith Stanfield are probably some of the best actors, I think, working today. And yeah, brilliant film. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, Daniel Kaluuya is great. Really good in Get Out. You know, a performance.
And he looks good on the back of a rhino in Black Panther.
Yeah.
He's really got range. Yeah, I'd love your feedback, but I guess neither of you guys watched it, so you just gotta smile and nod and be like, "Yeah, Liam, that does sound like a great movie."
It does. I was very close to watching it. There was a bunch of movies on my list, and just didn't get to it in time.
And if you're standing there holding, trying to decide between this or Trial of the Chicago 7, slight edge to Judas and the Black Messiah.
Right.
Fair enough.
Scott, yeah.
I'm going to take us from like deep and impactful film right up to some just airy nonsense. I'm going to bring up Free Guy. Free Guy makes my list of favorites from the year rather surprisingly because it was a rather surprising film. I watched it more or less on a lark, was not expecting anything from it, and was pleasantly surprised, possibly because I was expecting nothing from it. But yeah, it's not bad, guys. It's not a bad movie. As far as like kind of light, breezy movies go, it's got a nice uplifting message. Ryan Reynolds leans into type and plays Ryan Reynolds, which is a part he plays very well. He's surrounded by a pretty decent supporting cast. There's a ton of surprisingly on point digs at the video game industry, which I thought, as someone who kind of follows some video game news and some of the very serious consumer and business complaints surrounding the video game industry right now, I thought that was actually some well-deserved criticism. And it was a pleasant surprise that I would recommend if you're looking for something that's not terribly challenging, but will fill up a couple hours and probably make you smile by the end. You could do worse than Free Guy. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, I was surprised by some of the discourse that came out around it. Like, a lot of people were like, "This is way better than it has any right being."
Yeah, I'm going to make a comparison here, and it might not be entirely fair. I kind of put it in the same category as the Lego Movie, in that it was a movie that I saw with no expectations, that I was pleasantly surprised by, and that was probably better than it had any business being. But for the record, the Lego Movie is head and shoulders better than Free Guy.
Sweet. Yeah, I guess for someone like me who saw the trailer and went, "Well, that looks stupid, and I'm not going to watch that," without spoiling too much, or with spoiling too much, I don't care. What wasn't stupid about it? I guess, like, how was it not as dumb as it looked?
Because it actually does delve a little bit into the idea of artificial intelligence, and while it doesn't dive as deep as I kind of wish it might have, it doesn't leave the topic undiscussed. And because Guy, in the character in the game, does have self-awareness, is a person, essentially, who starts to break out of his rote programming, you get a little bit of exploration of him kind of trying to find meaning in a life that is fundamentally meaningless, because he's not even a main character in the game. He's bank teller. Like, that's his role. And when he starts to break out of that, it brings chaos to this game world, and it brings chaos to this game company in an interesting way. And there's a plot going on outside of the game that also has some nuance to it. And again, levels some very deserved criticism at a lot of these big AAA game companies and how they work. And I thought it was a pretty good movie, guys.
Sweet.
So, I mean, your mileage may vary. If you're a little Ryan Reynolds out, and that's fair. That's fair. It might not be for you.
He's just playing Ryan Reynolds in it, I assume.
Like, ever since Deadpool, that's basically all he's been playing. And that holds true here. And there is definitely a couple eye-roll moments in this movie because it is a Disney venture. So, I mean, there's going to be some Disney stuff in there. But, I mean, it stuck the landing for me. It made me smile. And in a year where there's been a lot of reasons not to smile, a movie that made me smile was a welcome movie. We'll put it that way.
Greg, you got one on your list that made you smile for big dumb stupid reasons? Because I certainly do. I certainly do.
No. The answer is no, I don't.
I'm just trying to find a through line.
A nice segue.
To be fair, we segued from Judas and the Black Messiah to Free Guy.
Free Guy, that's fair.
Yeah, I can't lay you up for that, but I mean, I appreciate you trying to lay me up for it, I suppose. Like my next film I wanted to talk about was Promising Young Woman. Mm-hmm. I don't know have either of you seen Promising Young Woman?
I wanted to when it came out, then I kind of forgot about it, and then in making this list, had every intention of watching it, and it ended up revisiting one of the movies on my list to make sure it was something I wanted to talk about. So took a movie watching spot that I had this week, but it's also way up there because I have heard nothing but good things, and there's a bunch of comedians I like in it. So please, sell me on it more.
The story of Promising Young Woman, Carey Mulligan plays Cassandra, who is a former medical student who her friend had been sexually assaulted and I believe committed suicide, and she is now spending her life basically attempting to get back at the male predators who, had done this to her. Not those people specifically, although that's part of it. But you may have seen, in the trailer, she acts drunk, and when the guys try to take her home and take advantage of her, suddenly she reveals that she is indeed sober. And yes, the movie it reminds me a little bit of Get Out in that, as a man, as a man watching this, like, you can't help but, look for the redeemable male character, because they're all such pieces of shit. Just as the same in Get Out, there are no redeemable white people in that movie, as hard as you try. The movie doesn't let up the gas on it at all. You just have to deal with it. And it's the same with Promising Young Woman. And Carey Mulligan is absolutely fantastic in this. And Bo Burnham is very good. Good turn by Doc Ock. Who am I thinking of? What's
Alfred Molina?
Alfred Molina. Yeah, he's got a brief scene in this as well. But I think famously this movie has a very shocking ending that not everybody loves. For me it worked. Although it's hard. It's pretty visceral. So just warning about that. If you're gonna go check out Promising Young Woman, there's an absolute speed bump in it. if you're squeamish at all, or you're triggered by assault, it's gonna do things to you. So, but yeah, it's just something that I couldn't leave off my list because it was, it just speaks to something that's very important for me to keep thinking about, in this day and age, and it's just a well put together film at the same time.
Is it funny?
Oh yeah, I think so. It's honestly, like,
I ask not because I think sexual assault's hilarious. It just got so many comedians in it that I'm curious if it's a funny film.
I think there's definitely the tone isn't it's strange. Like the tone is definitely kind of more in the dramedy side of things. Like it really shifts. Like when Carey Mulligan is hunting the men, like there's almost horror like elements to it. It's kind of a fascinating film that way, because it really kind of plays with a lot of your emotions as it goes through the various parts of it. And the middle of the film is actually kind of much more romantic comedy like, and it gets quite sweet, in fact, at certain points. It really takes you on a ride. And I think that might be why the ending is such a gut punch for a lot of people.
Cool. Yeah, like I said, I was minutes away from watching it, and then instead chose to watch one of my favorite films of the year for a second time, just because I was like thinking back, I'm like, is this my favorite, or was I just excited about it? And upon a second viewing, I would very much like to recommend a Canadian horror film, one of a couple Canadian horror films that I watched that were released. I was going to talk about briefly Blood Quantum, which is a zombie film where the tilt is Indigenous Canadians don't turn to zombies when they get bit, so they end up becoming the saviors. Very cool movie, but also it came out in 2019. A list I saw put it on a 2020 list. But just quick name drop for Blood Quantum. But the movie I want to talk about is a different Canadian horror film, horror comedy called PG Psycho Goreman. We discussed this ahead of time. I know you guys haven't seen it, but are you at all familiar with it? Have you seen the trailer? Are you?
I've heard nothing but good things about Psycho Goreman, and just have not had the chance to see it yet.
I went down to the lobby and bought it on Blu-ray. If you want to borrow my copy, I'll bring it to you. I'll bring it for you on Monday.
I'm reasonably familiar with it because I believe I watched a review of it on YouTube actually. So yeah, I'm well aware of its quirkiness, and I think is there one performance that like a lot of people can't get through?
Yes. So even though this might be one of my favorite movies of the past 2 years, I'm going to do a lot of apologizing for it.
But let's be fair, Liam. That's kind of standard for your best of year lists.
Yeah, I mean,
you're like, hey, the Greasy Strangler.
I put an entire decade of cinema behind the Greasy Strangler.
Yeah, the Psycho Goreman at the top of your list might be the most Liam thing ever.
So yeah, the premise is, or not the premise. What this movie sets out to do and does really, really well is show off very cool practical effects. It is a love letter to practical effects. There not only is the titular Psycho Goreman a guy in like a head to toe demon suit, with like dripping neon pink cracks that have blood coming out of him, and there's blood all running down his mouth, and he's got claws and stuff. He looks great. There's an entire council of like galactic lawmakers who locked him away thousands of years ago, because Psycho Goreman's up until he meets a certain character whose actual name is the Archduke of Nightmares, is just there to rip the galaxy asunder and extinguish all light in the universe. So the guys who lock him up is like a round table of some of the coolest like puppets and costumes you've ever seen. There's a whole scene where he like has a full on fight with like 5 other guys in really cool rubber costumes and puppet parts and practical effects. Like there's a character in this film who is a walking chum bucket of corpses. Like, so think a robot that's a bucket, and then in the bucket is just blood and corpses, nice. And he has a fist fight with a demon. Looks awesome. And so in that regard, it is very good. There's also a lot of really good humor in it. Like Psycho Goreman's going to describe all the ways in which he is, like, he's recounting a battle he had on like a rainbow bridge against some other cosmic being, and the kids just cut him off. They don't care. It's a lot of that kind of stuff, like playing with like the gravitas lore of this character, but putting this absurd demon into like a Harry and the Hendersons type movie. Like a real short circuit situation where like a family finds this weird critter, like E.T. It's like E.T. if E.T. was like gonna extinguish all light in the universe. And that is the performance I think a lot of people would have a hard time with, is the little girl who finds the gem and now has control over Psycho Gorman, who she names, hams it up. And it's not her fault. She was told to be like, she took the direction and ran with it. She's a child actor. And also part of the bit is she is, like, not afraid of him. Like, nothing phases her. She's very, like, Bart Simpson-esque, very bossy and very, like, I'm cool, I'm calling the shots, I'm way too mature for my age. Like, very Louise Belcher from Bob's Burgers type, right? And there's, especially in the first 10 minutes, she's a little tough to watch, but the performance grows on you, and then you get to see crazy monsters. The other little boy, the kid who plays her brother, has a much more grounded performance. He's definitely, like, a better actor.
And probably the straight man to her.
And the straight man to her. Yeah. Actually, if anything, I don't know which one you're referring to, Greg. I found the dad kind of insufferable. They try to make the dad character funny. And he's kind of like, he's got some of the cringier lines. But if you can get,
it's the little girl lead that I think that I've heard a lot of people had a tough time with.
Yeah. And if you're one of those people, if you watched it and you didn't like it, fair. But if watching a movie with a child actor chewing the scenery seems like something you wouldn't be able to get past, I encourage you to get over it, because she grows on you throughout the movie. She grows on you. The first 10 minutes is a little much, and then she grows on you. And I think she did a great job, and I'm excited to see her do more as she matures. So, very fun movie. Good practical effects. It's very Canadian. It does look like it looks like it was made. It was made for no dollars, and the dollars they did have went into blood puppets. So
the wettest, juiciest puppets they could buy.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, my last movie has monsters in it, but it's a Pixar film. I want to talk about Luca. This one really came in under my radar. I was aware it had come out, but I didn't hear a lot of buzz about it. And wow, I watched it and it was great. And I mean, Pixar's track record is good, arguably, so I shouldn't be too surprised by that. But the elevator pitch is a pair of boys decide to kind of spend the summer bumming around this Italian village, and they make friends with like a local, semi-local outcast and have adventures and have this summer of excitement. The twist is they're both creatures from the Black Lagoon, and they need to hide that fact from the villagers who are afeared of sea monsters, because they can look human so long as they remain dry. And therein lies some of the drama and some of the comedy, and it's very much a movie about acceptance. And I'm going to say this, it is as gay as you can make a movie by Disney aimed at children about children. Because the two male leads in the movie, like, their relationship does come across as maybe more than friends. And it's really touching as a coming-of-age story, and it's just good. Like, the animation is great, the performances are great. If you haven't seen Luca, treat yourself, is basically where I'm going with that. Because, again, it flew in under my radar, and I regret sitting on it as long as I did before I watched it, because it's definitely worth checking out.
How does it stack up against Soul?
I did not see Soul, so that is why Soul does not appear on my list. Nita did, and she raved about it, and then I didn't get around to watching it. is the simple truth about that. But I did watch Luca, and I did very much like it. So
nice. Sorry to put you on the spot there.
No,
if you want to run and ask Anita how it compares to Soul for me, that'd be swell.
The highest animated film on my list what ended up being The Mitchells versus the Machines, and that was sitting at about 11.
Which I did see, and Luca was much better.
Interesting.
I actually waffled about Mitchell's in the Machines or Free Guy on my list, and ultimately went with Free Guy, partly because I wanted to talk about Luca, and I didn't want to just have animated films on my list.
Sure. Yeah.
That's how I ended up too, right? Like Blood Quantum or Psycho Gorman, right? Cool. Yeah, it looked dear. I don't know how a Pixar movie flies under the radar. Like,
it's just because like so many people aren't going to theaters right now. It came out on Disney Plus, I want to say maybe around the time that they were just like, well, how about you just pay us $40 on Disney Plus and you can just watch it whenever. So I think it kind of low key came out, and it's a shame because it's really great, and I quite liked it and would recommend it.
Yeah, when you said it was by Pixar, I didn't even realize it. That's how under the radar it's been flowing for me. Are we at the top of my heap?
Yeah, back. What's your last one here, Greg?
It's called I Care a Lot. This is an Amazon.
No, I know you care a lot about movies, but what was the film you chose?
I care a lot. I don't think that either of you have seen this. Am I correct?
Can't say that I have.
I Care a Lot stars Rosamund Pike, who with this film just really locks down the terrifying female sociopath role. She's got that unlocked between this and Gone Girl. If you need that character, Rosamund Pike is your person to go to. She plays a character who basically she looks after old people once they've kind of lost their faculties and becomes their legal guardian. Except she is abusing this and using it to enrich herself. There's quite a few scenes at the beginning of the film just showing how depraved she is and how she just looks at these old folks as numbers, and looking them up and down for how much that they can squeeze out of their possessions and things like that once they do take their guardianship. It's a very interesting movie. Things go off the rails when she takes legal guardianship of a woman who has connections to the Russian mob, and then it just spirals from there. So that's kind of the elevator pitch. I've never watched a movie where I've enjoyed seeing a character on screen so much, but also hated them so much. Is the best way I can put it. I really I enjoyed Rosamund Pike's performance, and I almost want to say I like the character, but I also like every bad thing that happened to her was fantastic, and I love that too. So it's just like a thing where it's just like you just, especially in the age of the pandemic, like I just really enjoy seeing bad people get their comeuppance when on the rare chance that it does occur. And this movie does pay off in that particular way. So her character, she's not all it's not a movie where it's, just full of horrible characters that it becomes exhausting. Like the characters have a lot of life to them. They aren't depressing, or so wretched that it becomes a bit of a slog. Peter Dinklage's character, he's the Russian mobster, is very engaging. Chris Messina is in it. He's plays the Russian's lawyer, and he's fantastic. There's lots of really good kind of comedic moments in the film that it's not just a slog. Even though the subject matter and the people who are in it are all pretty horrendous. And Rosamund Pike's character has a really good relationship with her partner, and that kind of allows you to identify with her just enough so that you kind of want to her succeed, even if, in especially in my case, you also want to see her get her comeuppance in the end.
Yeah, that's very similar to the Lakeith Stanfield character in Judas and the Black Messiah, where you're like, I hate you, please continue.
Yeah. So yeah, highly recommend it. It's easily the best movie I've seen in the last 2 years. That's come out in the last 2 years.
I am not. I was just looking up the details. I'm not familiar with the director.
Yeah, it's new to me too, I believe.
Jay,
somewhat. I've seen Alice Creed, which was also good. He wrote that. I don't think he directed it. No. But yeah, he's. I don't think he's done. Oh no, he did. He did direct Alice Creed. Sorry.
Yeah, I looked up his Wikipedia, and he looks like the energy vampire from the TV series What We Do in the Shadows.
He does a little bit. Yeah.
Sweet, cool. That's another one I have to check out. Though my partner said she watched it, and she was like, "It was fine." So interesting. That's maybe what the point of art is.
Yeah, it's
highly
everyone
subjective.
pulls something different from it, from a particular piece of art for sure. Like generally speaking, when I'm doing my ranking, like that's kind of how I rank things. It's just like it's like how how did it how much did it speak to me? Like did it engage me on that level? Did I get the tingles in my brain while I was watching it, kind of thing, Yeah.
Well, that's definitely how I felt about my movie. Again, I didn't rank them. I don't know if this is my top movie of the year, but it's
You just said
one that
Psycho
is.
Goreman is.
Well, no, it's that's why I said it's second, because it's not quite. This one I think I might have gotten a little more. Hard to believe that you could get more out of a movie than a chum bucket robot monster, but here we are. Yeah, just that good feelings, those like inspiring, like you take something from it. And in this case, also not just from art, but as an artist myself, one of my favorite films of the year was The Sparks Brothers, the documentary by Edgar Wright. About a band called Sparks. Also, before I get into it, there was one other documentary about wild shit that no one's heard of in the 80s that I gotta give a quick nod to. If you have access to HBO Max, watch Class Action Park.
Yes,
It's like a documentary if like a guy opened a theme park where he tricked teenagers into doing jackass stunts, and you're like, how was this allowed to happen? So it's like all the fun of Jackass, but a documentary. Quick nod to Class Action Park. But I definitely got more out of the Sparks Brothers. So it's a music documentary. It's about the career of a band called Sparks. They've released 25 or so albums since the 70s. I don't consider myself much of a music like aficionado. Barely consider it for movies, but even less so for music. But I definitely have a fairly, at least from like a trivia perspective, like being able to answer Jeopardy questions about music. I feel like I've heard of most bands. I'd never heard of Sparks. When I saw the trailer for this, I thought Edgar Wright was doing like a Spinal Tap.
I think a lot of people did think he was doing that, actually.
I think a lot of people did, but they're a real band, and they're fucking great. And this movie was extremely affirming as an artist, because it's basically the story. It doesn't follow the same trajectory as a lot of rock documentaries where it's like, it's the rise and then the fall, but maybe it's coming back, like, or just like the rise and fall and now you're dead from too much cocaine. It really was the story of like two guys who did exactly the kind of art that they wanted to make for the last 3 or 4 decades. And it has, on one hand, ensured that they are forever at the edge of popular music, but has also made sure that they can continue on long after their peers and predecessors and contemporaries have, moved on to movie soundtracks or died of cocaine. They have cemented their place at the fringe of popular music for all of time. And because of that, live incredibly, artistically fulfilled lives doing exactly what they want to do. I started as a stand-up comedian and I don't do it too much anymore, partly because I found as I worked my way up the industry, it was getting harder and harder to do some of the gigs that required, I don't even want to say a broad appeal, but like required, I find, audiences that were willing to engage with me and what I was talking about, which you're not going to find at like a corporate Christmas party in Grand Prairie. And seeing like 25 albums these guys have made, and every one of them, some people love it. Everyone else is like, what is this? What? So if you've never heard of Sparks, that's actually more of a reason to watch this documentary. If you're like, why would I watch a rock doc about a band I've never heard of? That's the point. It might behoove you. Like the day I watched it, I knew I was going to watch it. So I spent the day listening to some of their music, and that gave me like, oh, that song. Oh, that's some context for that. That's some context for that. But honestly, go into it cold. You'll still be satisfied. And now I'm like, have a new band I like. Like 4 or 5 of their songs are now on playlists on regular rotation, right? It's great.
Yeah, I was aware this movie had come out, and it's also on my to-watch list. I haven't gotten around to it yet, but I also had not heard of the band. And my first impression was also, this can't be real, right? And then quickly found out, oh no, it actually is real. Yeah. So your recommendation,
Weird Al, Beck, and Jason Schwartzman all be like, "Oh, this is one of the greatest bands of all time." It's like, what? Like, what band?
It does not surprise me that Weird Al Yankovic is familiar with weird bands on the edge of popular culture.
Yeah. They've got fingers in all sorts of pies. I didn't realize there's a Paul McCartney video from the 80s references the keyboard player from Sparks. And that was like a quick thing where they had to like, the guys from Sparks are big Beatles fans, and then Paul McCartney gives them a nod in the 80s, and it like made their decade. So it's like they do show up. You might have heard their songs and not known it. But yeah, they exist right at the periphery of pop music. I'm kind of repeating myself here, sorry, but it is affirming as an artist to watch that film. Plus, it's an Edgar Wright joint, so it's got all the like style and panache and humor of an Edgar Wright film. So, yeah.
Yeah, that definitely bumped it up on my to-watch list. Yeah. And it was already on my to-watch list, so...
Yeah. Haven't seen Last Night in Soho yet, because that's still in theaters, so who knows? Maybe that would have been my Edgar Wright pick, but yeah, this movie kicked ass.
Yeah, there are a number of movies which I'm expecting that I'm probably going to like when I get around to seeing them that I just haven't seen from the last couple of years. Like The Green Knight, I'm probably going to like, but haven't seen it. Dune, probably pretty good. Haven't seen it.
We watched The Green Knight last night, actually.
And
it did make the cut.
And I'm still trying to unpack how I feel about it.
There you go.
Fair.
Not in a bad way. It's just it's an interesting film that will definitely leave you thinking about it afterwards.
Yeah, I'm worried that people are going to hear your lists of these movies that you enjoyed the past couple of years and hear my very milquetoast mainstream picks and are going to be like, I thought Scott was a movie snob. But I'm going to point out, I watched 12 Angry Men for the first time this year, and that is an absolute 5-star classic. I watched a Field in England this year, which is a psychedelic trip that Liam is definitely going to like when he gets around to it. I watched The Lighthouse this year, and that was amazing. Yeah. So, like, I've seen some movie snob films, people, just not some contemporary ones, okay?
One at the end of the day, 2 Disney films.
I watched The Trial this week, which is an Orson Welles movie about a Kafka story. So, starring the guy from Psycho. It's so good. Like...
Well, yeah. I guess now that we've worked out some of our insecurities, we can go hit break and then pick on some filmmakers' insecurities as we talk about our disappointments.
This episode of I Have Some Notes is brought to you by Alberta Association of Optometrists, proudly celebrating a century of caring for Albertans. It happens. Many people don't call their optometrist first for urgent eye care when they need it. From spring cleaning mishaps to winter eye infections, if you or your family have an eye emergency, doctors of optometry are trained to diagnose, treat, and prescribe medications, no referral necessary. And just a reminder, Alberta health coverage is available towards your urgent eye care appointment. To find an optometrist in your area, visit optometrists.ab.ca. The Alberta Association of Optometrists represents almost 800 doctors of optometry in over 80 communities across the province. Members are highly trained, regulated health professionals who provide primary eye health and vision care to Albertans. Learn more at optometrists.ab.ca.
Brr. Sure is chilly outside. The winter is here. It's cold weather times here in Alberta, and that means energy usage for all Albertans will be increasing. So now is a great time for listeners to look at their utility bills and ensure they are on the best plan. Albertans have a choice who they pay their utility bills to. Park Power is happy to provide free, no-obligation comparisons. If you decide to switch providers, it's easy. And you can feel good knowing you are supporting a local business and helping to give back to our communities with your utility bills. Learn more at parkpower.ca. Welcome back to I Have Some Notes. We're recapping the decade so far, the 2 whole years of it. In our favorite and now going into the second half here, least favorite films of 2020 and 2021. Most of the bad movies I watched were with you guys for the podcast, so that's encouraging.
Yeah, there were some bad movies. And to be fair, my bad movie pick is a movie we did an episode on. Because it was one of the most odious movies that I've seen in the last 2 years.
Yeah, I feel like I got kind of tricked by my disappointment a little bit.
Well, why don't we start with yours then, Greg?
Right, yeah.
So Mortal Kombat for me was the most disappointing movie that I watched. And you might think that it's stupid for me to be like, oh, I watched the video game movie Mortal Kombat and I was disappointed by it. I'd be like, well, obviously, asshole. It's not going to be good. But in my defense, they released the first 7 minutes of the movie before release. And it's this really good, tight action sequence set in medieval Japan, a fight between Sub-Zero and Scorpion, or who becomes Scorpion later, right? It's lots of fun, cool action. It's got it sets up little stakes within its scene really well and stuff like that. Like it's a good scene. And like normally when you watch a clip like that, you could watch a trailer and be like, wow, it looks good, but who knows what the movie's going to be like. But usually when a clip gets released and it's actually good, you're like, well, it should be indicative of what I can expect from the rest of the movie. So what I didn't know was, they released the only good 7 minutes of the movie. Because the rest of the movie was absolute piss. I couldn't believe how quickly it went from being awesome to being total trash in the span of like 30 seconds. It's written extremely poorly. If you think about the 90s Mortal Kombat,
that's as I often do. It is never fun for my thoughts.
It's pretty lame. It's not a very good movie, but structurally it's mostly there. It's still pretty watchable. This one goes from having a good intro to pretty much nonsense immediately. It tries to set up this Mortal Kombat tournament thing in the most ham-fisted way possible, which is a fucking vision board that Sonya is set up in a warehouse. And just that's it, just pointing at this is the combat thing, and there's the bad guys, this is the good guys, here's the symbol that people have on their arms when they get called to combat. It's awful. And even what's weird is that as good as the first action scene is, the rest of the action scenes are also not good. So I don't even know what happened. Did they have they hired a good fight choreographer and a good director for a day, and they're like, well, that's all we can afford, see you later, and then got a bunch of amateurs in for amateur hour? I hated it.
How does it rate against the original Mortal Kombat film?
Oh, I'd watch that one all day compared to this one.
Oh no. Actually, that one's a bit of a. Honestly, the original Mortal Kombat movie is a bit of a guilty pleasure for me.
Yeah,
I don't think it's that bad.
It's bad, but it's kind of like good bad. Like we've done it for the show. It was one of our earlier films, but like it's not irredeemable. Like it's got that kind of low budget action 90s action film charm to it. It's not good, and the effects don't hold up at all. I remember at the time the effects were like they were doing features on TV about how amazing the effects are, but like today they look so bad.
Yeah, that's good. No.
Yeah. So yeah, I would watch the 90s Mortal Kombat 100 times before I watch this one.
I feel like there was another movie recently that tried to pull the like, hey, here's a whole chunk of the movie to watch to get you excited.
Was it like one of the first one that comes to mind is like Prometheus, because Prometheus did that whole sequence with it wasn't in the movie, but they did that whole sequence with Wayland as doing his TED Talk.
Oh yeah, the TED Talk.
Yeah. So I think that kind of, but it's
maybe I am just thinking Mortal Kombat.
Yes, there was what's the one after Prometheus?
Alien Covenant.
Yes, that one had a big long scene of the characters on the ship before they hit the planet. And there was like a lot of really good character stuff in there, but it also wasn't in the film. But if you watch it, you would have like watched it thinking like, oh, this is indicative of what the film's going to be. This is good stuff. And then
you were fooled.
And it wasn't even in the movie, and the movie sucked.
Yeah, it sometimes, in watching movies and thinking about them critically, whether it's for this podcast or just in life, sometimes you have to remind yourself that like these are consumer products, or at least they are one part art, one part consumer product, and where it falls on that scale kind of depends. Like it really is a scale between El Topo and the Paw Patrol movie. And then everything else is somewhere in between of like how much of it's art, how much of it's commerce. And it sounds like this Mortal Kombat movie is just a cash grab.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. I know that the screenwriter was, it was his first major film. I read a big long interview with him before the film had released, and he did a good job talking it up. Like he was talking about how excited he was about it and stuff like that. And then it's I don't know if he's going to get another thing made.
Yeah,
he probably will. That's the way Hollywood works.
But yeah, you kind of fail upwards.
Only when you're a man.
They're just going to give him a more marketable. The problem was he didn't have a marketable enough property. They're going to give him a.
He had Mortal Kombat. How is that not a marketable property?
They'll give him a superhero or something.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah.
Speaking of superheroes, Liam and I said it at the same time. Oh boy! Wow! What a disappointment Wonder Woman 84 was. Not just as like a disappointing sequel to what was a pretty good Wonder Woman movie, but just as a terrible movie. It was the most miserable movie viewing experience for me for this podcast this year of a movie that came out in the last couple of years. Like there were a couple slogs that were worse, but they were older movies. This one was the most recent movie that was just like, I hated every minute of it. I'm pretty sure we succinctly covered all of the reasons why in our actual episode. Yeah. It's a visually spectacular movie. It's got a completely wasted cast. And it's got some decent ideas that just don't go anywhere. And some villains that have no cohesive or comprehensive motivations, and the ending is utter nonsense. It's just an absolute mess of a story that is indicative of a problem with a lot of these, and it's really true with a lot of the DC movies in particular, I find, of the last couple of years. Not all of them, and I think Liam has something to say about that, so put a pin in that. But like movies like the original Suicide Squad movie, and some of the other outings that they've had, where they hit the ground and start filming the movie, but they haven't actually written the movie yet. And it's all being done like day to day by committee as they're going. And so there's no story. Like it's not cohesive because there was no plan before they actually started like rolling film other than we have this A-list actor and we're going to put them in a superhero costume and we're going to make $1 billion. And that's not how you should be approaching movie making at all. And Wonder Woman 84
my understanding is that happens a lot more than what is generally known.
Ironically, Wonder Woman 84 is the microcosm of that because it is a movie about flashy 80s high value, low substance living. Is kind of like the underlying theme of the movie, and the movie itself is flashy and meaningless. And so like chef's kiss. If that was the intention, chef's kiss, but it was not the intention.
Yeah. I think like given the time that this movie came out in, it kind of adds an extra level of disappointment to it because it was one of the first major releases to come out in the pandemic era, and I think we were all kind of clamoring for a big bombastic blockbuster because we hadn't been been deprived of the summer movie season and things like that. And I think it came out close to Christmas, if I recall.
It was a Christmas thing, essentially.
Yeah. So that sort of adds to the extra level of disappointment. And like you say, Scott, like the first one was pretty good, and you think you've got it's the same team that came back to do Wonder Woman 1984. The marketing looked incredible, so you think that it's going to be good, and so falls on its face.
Yeah, when you're talking about like by committee, even if it's not like a day-to-day thing, and I'm sure there was some of that, you can see the focus group notes all over this movie, and it's like going back to what I was talking about with the Sparks. Make the art you want to make. And then let people just engage. Like, you can find some kind of or it actually goes back to the thing I was saying about the sliding scale of is it art or is it a commercial product? And it's like, this one is again. They're just trying to cash in on something, and it's not. Fuck.
They're not trying to tell a story. They're just trying to make money.
Yeah, exactly. So. Which sort of leads me into in this. I know we're talking about our most sort of disappointing of the year. But I'm going to say it here. I think my favorite film of the year, or at least my favorite movie-going experience of the last 2 years, was James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. Because I hadn't been to a theater in over a year. We all went, you two, a bunch of my other friends. And that is a R-rated, stylish, superhero movie with a kaiju at the end. And is made as a fuck you to Disney. Like, I can't imagine a better movie to see in the theaters after being deprived movie time than R-rated superhero kaiju fuck you. Like, and so my disappointing movie that I want to discuss is all 3 of the Marvel movies that came out this year. Your Black Widow, your Eternals, your Shang-Chi. And if I actually had to stack them up against each other, Black Widow, even though Wonder Woman 1984 really fucks up the curve, Suicide Squad and Birds of Prey are both better. They're both equally pretty good. I like Suicide Squad a little more, but they're both exceptionally good movies. Birds of Prey and Suicide Squad. They are both better than the 3 Marvel movies. So much so that including Wonder Woman doesn't tip the scale in any way, and I still think DC had a better 2 years than Marvel has, film-wise. Even counting Wonder Woman in and amongst them. This is what I'm worried about with the MCU going forward. I think the next bunch of Marvel movies are going to have the same problem all of the DC movies previously had, which is they are trying to recreate the Marvel magic. And I know lightning in a bottle is a weird way to frame 22 movies over a decade. But Kevin Feige and the MCU from Iron Man 1 to Avengers Endgame pulled off something pretty miraculous.
Yeah, and it is a story.
It took creative vision, it took implementation. All the Marvel movies from Iron Man to Endgame defined the last decade of cinema, and I don't think anyone will ever be able to do a shared universe movie thing as well as them ever again. And you saw it with all the first Justice League, the Batman vs Superman movie, whatever, where they were trying so hard. DC was trying so hard to emulate Marvel. And I think going forward, Marvel is going to have a hard time emulating Marvel.
You're probably right. Yeah.
The expectations are so high. Part of it was the slow burn, was the building, whereas now we're all expecting it. And I think DC, if they're smart, and by the looks of Suicide Squad and Birds of Prey, hopefully they're figuring it out, gonna go off, try to do their own thing. That Batman movie that's coming out looks great.
Robert Pattinson
one. That looks like instead of trying to be here's Batman but the Green Lantern's here now. Great, just do a good Batman movie. Do it in its own cool way. You don't need to try to recreate the Avengers. And so, yeah, I had a lot of fun at Suicide Squad, and every one of those Marvel movies, I was just you're trying so hard to do.
Well, Black Widow was just not good, period. It has not even anything to do with them trying too hard. It was just it is boring. Is my biggest problem with it.
Scott looks incredulous. Do you disagree?
What's that?
Anita cried at the beginning of that movie, and she gave me explicit permission to tell you that she did.
Oh, really? Okay. No, it didn't do anything for me.
The problem with Black Widow. The problem with Black Widow, from my perspective, I actually think that it tells an interesting story. The problem is that the story came out about 5 years too late.
Yeah.
And that kind of killed a lot of momentum that movie had, because the character's dead.
Yeah.
And now we're getting the story about her too late for it to really matter. And I think that's part of the reasons the movie comes across a little flat, honestly. I haven't seen Eternals, full disclosure, haven't seen it yet. I have seen Shang-Chi. I also thought that movie was pretty good. And again, one of the same reasons I thought Black Widow was pretty good, and that is because it tells an interesting story within a superhero story. Yes, on the one hand, it's Marvel doing wuxia, but it's a superhero movie about a broken family kind of coming back together. And that was interesting to me because it was different. And
sure.
But again, the movie's not spectacular.
And
there was stuff in it that I hated.
So Shang-Chi, for me, Shang-Chi is literally just downhill the whole movie. The bus fight's awesome. The introduction of the character's awesome. Then it goes to Hong Kong. That's pretty good. But by the time they get to the magical dragon world where they're just fighting an army of CG monsters, I was I don't care anymore. This is that. And Eternals sort of plateaus. The whole movie just holds the line at 2/3 good. It had some interesting ideas, but it also kind of fumbled the execution a little. And it gets very precious with trying to I think that's the thing I didn't like about Eternals is a lot of the criticism with Eternals is there's too many characters. And I don't think there's too many characters, but I think they're too interested in setting these characters up to be in future movies than just exploring the movie they're in right now.
Yeah.
And there is enough time for all of those characters to have their moment. There's not enough time for all of those characters to have their moment and introduce Kit Harington as the Black Knight and introduce the ones that survive to go off into the space and fight the multiverse or whatever.
That's funny because that describes almost exactly what DC used to be doing wrong.
Exactly.
And that's a fair criticism of both Shang-Chi and Black Widow, too, is that both movies are serving partly as a springboard for characters to be in later movies and less about the movie that it is. Shang-Chi arguably is probably a little more guilty of that than Black Widow, because, again, Black Widow is Natasha's story, and Natasha's dead. So,
yeah. And I think that's why, like, the first Iron Man, the first Thor, the first Captain America movies are so good, is they're not setting up anything. They're just, they're introducing, they're not setting up.
Yeah,
whereas
that's fair.
Yeah. The connections to the other films usually happened in the post-credit sequences, like a tease, but, like, they weren't just building everything towards, like, some future crossover.
Yeah, exactly. So, whereas James Gunn's Suicide Squad or even Birds of Prey, it's just a cool movie doing its own thing, and for that I love it.
That's fair.
So,
and they both were good movies.
It was bound to happen eventually that, like, Marvel would have a dip and DC would make good on some promises, right? So
yeah, or I don't even know if it's a dip. I think just the lesson here that everyone needs to learn is don't try to recreate what Marvel did. They did it. It's only ever going to work the one time. Quit trying. So, which is why I hate to say this, but as we look to the future in this new year, I am very excited to go see Spider-Man No Way Home on Monday because I like going to the movies and I like Spider-Man. Do not have high hopes. Yeah. I have extremely low hopes for that because, again, it's the thing I was talking about of the, like, is it art or is it people trying to make money? And the fact that Into the Spider-Verse is such a cool, good, interesting movie. And so are all the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, but Into the Spider-Verse made a bunch of money and made a big splash, and they're like, you guys like it when Spider-Man goes to other dimensions? Here you go. And it's like, no, man, like, that's not, you don't, like, you're rehashing every other Spider-Man movie. The premise of Into the Spider-Verse and the characters and bits and visuals and nostalgia of all the other Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies, and it's like, just make a good Spider-Man movie. You don't have, like, it's so frustrating that they don't get, like, I don't know. I'm sort of stammering here.
I have to wonder if, like,
you guys know what I'm saying. Get me back on course here.
Marvel's decision, because, like, it seems like Sony has their paw prints all over that, because, I mean, they've got a large say in what goes on with Spider-Man, because they essentially own the rights. So, like, Marvel's got to make a deal with them, and they were trying to build to a Sinister Six movie with the Andrew Garfield universe and couldn't quite make it happen. So I think when they looked at where they wanted to go with Spider-Man, some producer somewhere at Sony said, hey, technically all of the Sinister Six already exist, right? Like, we can make this happen if we wanted to make it happen. Maybe Marvel's hand was forced. It is an impressively weird decision to make the live action movie also a multiverse movie when you already had a really good one. They already did it. Such a strange thing to do.
You say that this smells like a Sony thing, but Disney knows that nostalgia sells. Take a look at Star Wars. And so,
like, nostalgia engine.
I can't help but feel that there's some Disney in there too, going, you know what? People like those old Spider-Man movies. I bet you if we made a movie about those old Spider-Man movies, it would make a bunch of money. Let's see who's available. Like that to me reeks of Disney as much as it reeks of Sony.
It absolutely makes sense on paper from a financial decision. Do what worked in the last best Spider-Man movie, the multiverse thing, and layer on a whole heaping layer of nostalgia. But that's so myopic. It's the art versus commerce. It's probably going to make a lot of money, but then they're going to blow all the goodwill and it'll be the last one. Whereas if they had gone with an original idea, maybe we'd get a fourth, what's his name?
Now, you're being...
The Tom Holland. Maybe we'd get a fourth Tom Holland movie, or maybe it'd just be a better movie, but this is just gonna be garbage because all it is rehashing the last good Spider-Man movie with a bunch of nostalgia put in.
Now, in fairness, you have not yet seen the movie, and it only just came out, so it is perhaps putting the cart a little bit before the horse, assuming that it's going to be terrible when you haven't seen it yet. It might be good.
But also I already have tickets.
So really, even if it's terrible, you're part of the problem, Liam.
Exactly. But
But it might be good. It might be. Who knows?
I hope I'm wrong. I truly hope I'm wrong. I like
that you brought up Star Wars, Liam, because like Star Wars is a great example of like where you can practically see Disney's notes on the screen. You know, when you're watching something like Rogue One or something like that, you're like, oh, you gotta have Leia in there. You know, you have to think that like with their other franchises, like they're going to, they got a whole industry to worry about, the toys and all this other kind of stuff. And like you say, this has almost been a theme to this particular show at this point. But like, you know, art and money don't necessarily mix particularly well. And like when money drives art, you end up with some pretty shitty art sometimes. So yeah, it's you know, it's you kind of have to think that like a lot of these large franchises that Disney has hoovered up over the years, I don't want to try and say that they're gonna burn out necessarily, because I think they're always going to be Star Wars stuff at this point. Like they'll find a way of making some new movies and things like that, and new TV shows, and keep the franchise going forevermore. But I certainly think that the specialness of them is over. And this is the same with Marvel. Like the peak is come and gone. It's not ever going to be the same as it was before. We all had a good time, with the ride. It was fun. Some of these franchises peaked earlier, like Star Wars, they peaked in the 80s. But like, it's just the natural evolution of any particular franchise, right? And then this is the same with like Star Trek. Star Trek peaked in the 90s. It's probably never ever going to be as good as it was at that point. I realize that that's a matter of opinion, but like it's just, at a certain point, when you try and continue these big giant universes and these big connected films, it just starts to get a little bit too messy, and that's honestly like why I don't read comic books, because it feels like the entry points are it makes it inaccessible, because there's just like literally decades and decades of comics to read and understand. Not that I wouldn't get a standalone Spider-Man comic or anything like that, but you know what I mean. Like it just feels like you can't complete it, and I'm kind of a completionist.
I guess what I find so baffling is like, if you look at Into the Spider-Verse, aside from the fact that Spider-Man's a pretty bankable character, that whole movie was brimming with creative risks.
Yeah.
Right? Everything about Into the Spider-Verse was creative and risky and new. And it paid off in a big way. Whereas something like Wonder Woman 1984 was safe, predictable, full of notes, made by committee, and it sucked ass. And it's like, when are they gonna realize that like you're probably better off taking a big risk and failing than trying to make this safe bet every time when it's still gonna fail, because the safe bet is inherently a failure. Like,
the irony is that the Marvel movies were in a way reinvigorated by some big swings that could have been huge misses.
Iron Man.
Well, not just I'm not talking about Iron Man necessarily, because I'm talking after they were established, there was some complaints that they were getting samey, and then all of a sudden, boom, Guardians of the Galaxy. Yep. A movie about a team that includes a tree and a talking raccoon that nobody had ever heard of. Boom, Thor Ragnarok. Let's take Thor in a completely different direction by taking a risk on a different director. Like,
but even just like, nobody knew who Iron Man was in 2008. Nobody would have, but like, that was all the best ones were the risky ones,
kind of.
And all the forgettable ones were safe.
Yeah.
So when you tell me you're going to make a Spider-Man movie that's got the same premise as the last one and all the characters, or the fact that the Flash movie, apparently they're making a Flash movie with Michael Keaton Batman.
Yep.
It's like, you fucking idiots. Just, yeah, Michael Keaton Batman is going to be in the Flash movie. And it's like, just make a good Flash movie. Just do anything. Sorry to rant, but that's It's baffling to me, and it makes me. It's why the Sparks Brothers was such a good movie for me, because it reminds me that there is value in art.
Yeah, I guess the calculation that Disney must be doing in the long run is thinking that they could probably make more money making 12 safe movies rather than trying to hit a home run with 12 movies. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, that's probably the calculation they're making in their head, and they've got to serve the investors, right? So and the investor, investors don't like wild swings, right?
No, they like safe
But they
bets.
do love chasing the last wild swing that was successful.
Sure
Yeah,
do.
they like safe movies.
So. Anyway, I look forward to doing No Way Home on the podcast in the new year.
Sure, yeah.
I hope I'm wrong. But yeah.
Well, this was a bit of a longer episode, but you know what? It's kind of our big end-of-year finale before we go on a little holiday break, so hopefully you got a little extra out of it to make up for the fact you're not going to be hearing our dulcet tones for a little while.
Yeah. If you made it through, congratulations.
Yes.
You got to hear us just be depressed about Spider-Man.
Yeah, take an extra 20 minutes to really take a piss on us.
Take a chunk out of a movie I haven't seen yet, but it was permeated all that I have been thinking about in regards to movies recently. So
Here's the thing: by the time this episode comes out, Liam will have seen that movie, and he may have to post on social media a retraction of everything he just said, which would be very funny.
Yeah. To end things on maybe a little bit of hope with regards to the movie industry, like the one thing that I am noticing is that the way that streaming services are changing the industry, like the lot of stuff is getting greenlit, like a lot of stuff, and you know that means there's going to be a lot of crap, but like it does mean that like a lot of interesting writers and directors are getting their stuff made. Even if it's like smaller budget stuff, and I've seen like quite a few movies recently where they weren't big releases and not a lot of people know about them, but they ended up being some of my favorite movies of the year. So there's hope that maybe there's a little bit of a film renaissance going there in a backwards way in the industry's effort to try and make the most money possible. They're sort of laying some good foundation for smaller creative people. So that's got, hopefully that'll be a really good thing.
I hope you're right, Greg. But in closing, I just want to again remind anyone listening, please follow us on social media. We're at I Have Some Notes on Twitter. Look up I Have Some Notes on Facebook, and at I Have Some Notes Pod on Instagram. Please subscribe, review, any way that you can engage with this on the medium you're on. Please do that. It helps.
Yeah. Hey, we watch a lot of movies, but you know who doesn't watch a lot of movies? Emily. And that's why she's being forced to catch up on all that pop culture on Emily Missed Out, fellow member of the Alberta Podcast Network. You can check them out right now at albertapodcastnetwork.com.
I should have looked up when our next episode is before we started recording, but I didn't. I think it's January 13th, but it's in around there somewhere. So come on back in January and we'll see you then. I'm not sure what movie we're doing either.
Yeah,
we'll be voting on it, I'm sure, on our social medias.
We'll put up a poll in early January for you to pick the next one.
Please be gentle with us for our first movie back.
Sure. Yeah, that would be nice. Nice soft landing for the new year.
Until then, I've been your host, Liam Creswick.
I'm Scott C. Bourgeois.
I'm Greg Beaver. Merry Christmas and keep watching the skies.